We are right on the hour at 6 p.m. and I'd like to thank everybody for joining this public presentation. Before I get started with the presentation, we have a few words from our district manager, Bob Swithers. Over to you, Bob.
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. And I'm sure many of you on here have been on these info sessions, and I've probably met a lot of you in person. So I just want to thank you in advance for being on here. You know, this is a really important day for us. I know for you as well, some of you as well. We've done a lot of work at Jupiter, and we've done some planning with that. We've had discussions about it. This resource management plan and this plan that we're about to overtake right now, it's going to set the overarching guidance for the management of this public land 30 years. And so that's very significant. And it's more significant that we get your input. And that's why I have signed up to hear our scoping and see the presentation. The public involvement in planning and the management of the sites like the ONA is so critical in being able to service the public interest and provide the resource protection that you're expecting and the opportunities that you're expecting public use and enjoyment. The BLM appreciates again your presence, and hopefully when you or send in your comments and stuff that we'll be able to reply back to that, and you won't feel like your input was not received. I just want to say that there's no bad ideas. So if you have significant interest or a significant issue, make sure you communicate that. And Peter's going to talk to you right now, and I'm going to hand it back over to him, how to do that communication, and then how the responses will be handled. So thanks again that you all showed up tonight, and hopefully this is the start of the next 20 to 30 years of what the Jupiter future will look like.
And thank you, Bob. So just before I begin the presentation, a couple of housekeeping items. Everybody has come into this webinar both muted and unable to use their camera. This webinar is set up as a presentation where we are going to provide to you some information about this planning process, and then we're going to talk about how to participate in that process, how to send us your comments. There is an opportunity at the end of this presentation to ask any clarifying questions about the process or about what you've seen, but we are not taking your comments in a live format here, and all comments do need to be submitted in writing to the email address or website provided at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, I will begin the presentation. There is always a little bit of confusion when working with the government about some of the terminology we use. So to ensure everyone understands what we're talking about, I just want to talk about a couple of the items we'll be talking explicitly about today. First and foremost, as many of you are already familiar with, the Outstanding Natural Area, or ONA, is the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse Outstanding Natural Area, and this is 120 acres of BLM administered public lands which was congressionally designated in 2008 as an outstanding natural area and making it part of the BLM's National Conservation Lands. The next term I want to talk about is RMP, or Resource Management Plan. This is a long-term overarching plan that provides guidance for public lands. Specifically, we're talking about the Florida Resource Management Plan that was written in 1995 and included partial management for some of the lands that are now within the ONA. Those lands that were not BLM administered at the time are not covered by this plan. The next term I want to talk about is amendment, also known as an RMP amendment or an RMPA, and this is the BLM's process for modifying, adding or adjusting or removing decisions to address newly acquired lands or emerging issues and changes in regulation, policy and management strategies. The final term you'll hear me mention is an EA, or an environmental assessment, and this is a National Policy Act or NEPA document which analyzes the impacts of our decisions on the human and natural environment, so that we can disclose what those impacts are and understand the impacts of our decisions. Public scoping, the process we're currently engaged in, is the opportunity for public engagement in our decision-making process. It actually is a 30-day period for review and consideration of the scoping materials, which are provided on our website, and I will talk specifically about how to access them later. It includes initial proposed action, some alternatives, and the potentially impacted resources. This is formally started by a notice of intent to prepare an amendment, which is released in the Federal Register and when the scoping package is uploaded to the EPlanning website. For this project, the scoping period officially began on 22nd of January with the publication of that notice of intent, and it ends in February 22nd, where all those comments provided will be rounded up and summarized into a scoping comment report that can then be considered by our decision makers. This is the formal scoping presentation. Today is February 9th, 2020, and it was given at 6 p.m. and I'm just saying that so anybody who was watching the recording of this understands when it was given. And it's typically we give these scoping presentations about midway through that scoping period, so people have an opportunity to read the materials beforehand and then also see the presentation before the comment deadline. All scoping comments must be submitted in writing. We found that is absolutely the best way to truly capture the intent of your comment rather than any kind of interpretation of that and then include it in our administrative record. This public scoping presentation has specifically 5 parts. First, it will identify the decision area and the focus of our decision making. It's going to describe the purpose and need, why we need to make the decision. I'm going to explain what a no action is, the interim or initial proposed action, and then the alternatives. I'm then going to recognize and talk briefly about the potentially impacted resources, and then I'll discuss what a substantive comment is and how to participate in this process. So to get our bearings, we are talking about some BLM administered land in South Florida on the Atlantic coast. As you can see by the images on this, it is in an urban area, and we're actually talking about this 120-acre section that was previously part of a military reservation and has been relinquished over the years in various segments back to the administration of the Bureau of Land Management. From the bird's eye view, you can see that it is a lot of green space. It includes the historic National Register listed Jupiter Lighthouse, as well as lots of other infrastructure stemming back from military use and mostly from the US Coast Guard era of use on the site. And again, that's specifically the boundary of this decision-making process, and the decision looks at only decisions affecting this piece of BLM-administered land. So just a little bit about what it is to be an outstanding natural area. This was a congressional designation that was made in 2008 in the Consolidated Natural Resources Act, and specifically it identified this site to protect, conserve and enhance unique and nationally important values for the benefit of current and future generations. So those values, just to describe them very quickly, were the historic values of the site, which is the significant maritime and military history, including the National Register listed lighthouse. They were the cultural values, including over 5,000 years of human occupation and the associated archaeological resources and record attached to that. They were also the biological values, which is 28 special status species across 4 sensitive habitats. Of those species, 6 are federally listed. I view those first 3 as the tangible values recognized by Congress, but Congress also said there was value for recreation opportunity of the site, which is exemplified by over 100,000 recreational visits each year. Congress said that the site was a place where we should have the opportunity to conduct scientific research, and to that end we have partnerships with a number of universities, including Florida Atlantic University, Palm Beach State College, and even as far away in Utah with Brigham Young University. In addition to science, Congress recognized the important value of education and the opportunity to provide that on the site through our direct education and interpretive programs, many of which are provided by our partners, with over 100 K-12 programs delivered annually and a wide variety of other educational opportunities from pre-kindergarten to adult education. The final value recognized by Congress was that of the scenic value of the site, which we view as the iconic nature of the lighthouse and the green space around it. Now, to move on, if you had read the scoping package, you would have seen the presentation of the preliminary purpose and need for this action. That describes why the federal government, and the BLM in this case, needs to make a decision. So we are specifically seeking to amend the Florida Resource Management Plan from 1995. We need to update the special designations and then provide land use planning level direction for land and recreation programs within the ONA, reflecting our evolving long-term need for management and enhancement of those values that I previously mentioned from the designation. The purpose of this action is to establish management direction for these lands and resources, specifically by providing guidance that is currently missing for lands relinquished to the BLM by the US Coast Guard, to address the availability of that land for various land use authorizations, to identify recreation management and recreation management areas, and address the need for an interpretive or visitor center on site. And then finally, to determine whether the special management attention provided to the existing area of critical environmental concern, or ACEC, is warranted, considering that the ONA designation from Congress is a higher level of protection. Also presented in the scoping package are the preliminary planning criteria. These is the framework under which we will make the decisions. We will first, of course, comply with all laws, regulations, and policies. We will recognize valid existing rights and appropriate partner uses consistent with all applicable laws. Right? The decisions made will establish new land use level planning guidance and identify existing guidance for managing the outstanding natural area, while striving to protect, conserve, and enhance those unique and nationally important values recognized in the congressional designation. By making these decisions, we will provide a framework for accommodating visitors in a wide range of educational, interpretive, and passive recreation experiences, while remaining fiscally responsible and only making achievable management decisions. Ultimately, we intend to provide safe facilities and infrastructure along with the grounds that are compatible with achieving the resource goals and objectives for the outstanding natural area. So moving on to talk about the no action. The no action are the decisions that were previously made, and so it's kind of like the current management situation. The no action stated that the management objective for the site, which at the time included Lot 15, Lot 20, and Lot 19, would be to maintain viable scrub communities and improve habitat conditions while interpreting natural and cultural resources and providing recreation opportunities in an urban setting. Now, that urban setting comes with some management direction to allow a very large range of recreational activities. The specific decisions or allocations were to designate Lot 15 as the Jupiter Inlet Area of Critical Environmental Concern. This enhanced the protection of the habitats within this region over typical rest of the BLM land. Lots 15 and 20 were available for an RP&P lease, which is a recreation and public purpose, and that allowed the creation of Lighthouse Park. The conveyance of that to the town of Jupiter removed it from BLM administration. Lot 15 is technically still available for conveyance under this no action decision. Although that's a very specific type of lease, the decision was also to allow the entire tract to be available for cooperative management with other government and private organizations, but not available for sale or disposal or exchange. So we couldn't have sold it to a private developer or exchanged it for another piece of property elsewhere in Florida or in the United States. The final allocation was that management will conform to a recreation opportunity spectrum of urban, or ROS, allowing for a very large variety of recreational uses, some that are not compatible with the management objective, and also to manage it for visual resource management class 3 objectives, which allow some fairly significant modification to the landscape and the visual environment. The scoping package includes an initial proposed action. The management objective would change to a more holistic, interdisciplinary management objective, which would be to conserve the National Register listed lighthouse, cultural and historic resource, and the relic interior scrub community, which is isolated within an urban landscape, while offering opportunities to the public for outdoor recreation, solitude, nature viewing, fishing, historical exploration and interpretation, and scientific research, all while managing the site for the benefit of current and future generations and the preservation of the ONA's 7 key resource values. The land use allocations would change. That area of critical environmental concern would be removed as it's no longer necessary. It's a duplicate designation on land, and the congressional designation as an outstanding natural area is far more protective of the site. It would, however, create a special recreation management area, different style of management, with 3 recreation management zones, or RMZs. Those would be the southern portion of the site where the infrastructure is and the historic corridor, the shoreline portion of the site where there's a very different type of use, and then the interior trail systems of the site. And doing this allows the application of different styles of management, different intensities of visitor services and infrastructure to be applied across the site. A new decision that any land acquired outside of the current boundary would be managed as the same as those adjacent lands, and that's a decision that's being added to all BLM's resource management plans across the states, or across the Eastern States organization. And then finally, this decision would actually limit some land use authorizations and specifically not allow for the long-term leasing of property. So the scoping package also includes an alternative C, which is presented for analysis purposes. This alternative has the same management objective of proposed actions, but some different allocations or decisions under it. First and foremost, it would expand rather than remove the area of critical environmental concern. It does this because an expansion was suggested in 2015, and to provide management with the knowledge of what expanding versus removing potential risk to the resource, that discussion can be had through the presentation of this expanded ACEC. This decision would continue to designate those special recreation management areas and RMZs the same as the proposed, but it would not allow the creation of an interpretive centre. The decision that acquired lands would be managed the same as adjacent remains there, and that's specifically to address when Lot 16 and Lot 21 are returned from the US Coast Guard to the BLM. Under this alternative, there would be limits on temporary land use authorizations, which are special recreation permits and film permits, other short-term authorizations to use the land, but it would allow long-term leasing. Long-term leases are leases up to and over or up to 30 years, and typically for commercial purposes. So moving on, I want to talk about the potentially impacted resources by this decision. It is fair to say that these closely reflect the values for which the outstanding natural area was designated, and include the cultural resources found on site, because that archaeological record can be disturbed by any construction, development, enhancement of visitor infrastructure on site, as well as by increasing use of the site. The same is true of the historic structures and the pressure on them from the increasing visitation. Special status species and native and natural wildlife habitats are also impacted essentially by the same things. Any action we take that adds to the level of infrastructure, draws more visitors to the site as a destination, has the potential to impact these resources. Not all impacts, however, are negative. Some of these impacts can be beneficial, such as more directly and intensively managing recreation use can limit impacts to native habitats and wildlife. Beneficial impacts are also expected to recreational resources by having this dedicated level of management. Scenic values are likely to be impacted by the creation or the allowance of any new development on site, and we always address any impact on human health and safety that may result from our decisions. Moving on now to how to participate in this process. You are already participating by attending this public scoping presentation or by watching the recording of this. Hopefully you're all aware that the scoping package was released back in January and is available on the BLM's EPlanning website. Here is a link to that website now. It's also, the link has been posted on our social media and has been widely circulated to our email list. So once you've seen this presentation, once you've reviewed that material, you participate by providing us your comments on those documents specifically. Please note that in your comments that you provide, before you include your name, address, telephone number, email, or any other personally identifiable information, be aware that while we will try and have that remain off the public interface, if a FOIA request is submitted, we may not be able to withhold that information, so we cannot guarantee that it will be kept private. Your comments should focus specifically on the preliminary purpose and need that I've presented, the preliminary planning criteria, addressing anything we might have missed that can focus management and decision making, the proposed action and any alternatives, and those potentially impacted resources. To talk a little more about the EPlanning website, it's actually a very user-friendly website. Click on the link, it will take you directly to this page with some basic information about the decision-making process that's occurring, a map of where the action will be applied. I want you to pay attention to, over on the left, the menu, and there you will see the Participate Now button. So when you're ready to submit your comment, that is where you'll click. You can also review the documents associated with this, and you can read similar information that I'm telling you on how to get involved. But we'll go ahead and click that Participate Now button, and it takes you to a screen like this. Again, it's got the document that we're participating and document we're talking about, which is the Florida RMPA EA scoping package. And you'll see there is a large green button on the right that says Participate Now. This is how you enter your comment. Please note that the website is the preferred method of commenting because it puts your comment directly into our admin record. However, if you're uncomfortable using the website, you can email it to BLM_ES_Jupiter ONA at blm.gov, or you can send it by hard copy mail to the program manager at the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse at Standing Natural Area, Bureau of Land Management, 600 State Road 707, Unit B, Jupiter, Florida 33469. Once you do click that green button, it takes you to the comment form. It allows you to type directly in. You can also type your comments in another word processing software such as Word or Google Docs, and then copy and paste it into this comment box. You can upload files that support your comment, and there is the opportunity to even upload a copy of your letter if you've prepared it separately and it's in a PDF document. And then you are invited to provide your name, and which is optional, and additional contact information if you wish to do so. And then finally, you'll see at the bottom right there is a preview button. Once clicked, it takes you to a preview of your comment and the files you've attached, and then there is a confirm button which allows you to actually send it, and note that you will get a receipt for that, and the comment will be directly placed in the admin record for our review. So what to include in your comment? Well, to be most helpful, your comments need to be as specific as possible and substantive. Substantive means that they are providing new information, not reiterating things that have already been presented, about the proposed action, alternatives, the potentially impacted resources. At a later stage, it will be the analysis that we provide. It might identify a different way to meet that purpose and need, or point out specific flaws in the planning decision-making process. It might suggest alternate reasons and why for different methods of achieving an action and why they should be used. I'll make factual corrections. Please note that non-substantive comments do not get addressed or included, and I don't want anybody to waste their time by submitting non-substantive comments. Non-substantive comments are comments that do not pertain to the decision area. So if you're commenting on a different piece of public land elsewhere that isn't at the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse, that Standing Natural Area, they will not be addressed by this. If you provide feedback that isn't relative to this purpose and need for amending the 1995 Florida Resource Management Plan or the proposed actions on alternatives presented, it is not substantive at this point. And then expressions of opinion that have no reasoning or rationale or no supporting data are also not substantive. So people just simply saying, I like that or I'm against that decision without any justification or supporting data do not get carried forward. It really isn't a voting process, so no matter how many people say that, if they don't provide a reason and rationale for their opinions, their points of view, they're non-substantive comments. And then finally, any comment that takes the form of a vague and open-ended question really isn't substantive. So really focus on specifics about the proposed action, the planning criteria, the purpose and need, and any alternatives we have. So at this point, I'd like to take any questions about the process from the audience, and let's see what we've got come up. The first question is between long-term leasing versus MOUs and similar agreements. The substantial difference between those is MOU, a shorter amount of time. They last for up to 10 years and then have to be reviewed and renewed every year for that period. If they exist beyond that 10 years, they keep getting renewed and reviewed through that process. A long-term lease is actually offered at market value for the use of the land over a much longer period, up to 30 years. The next question to come is, let's see, if I could comment on how these plans, a great question about the process. First and foremost, the resources of the site will be protected through the planning criteria that requires the following of all regulation, law and policy. For archaeological resources that will be followed through this decision-making process and all implementation actions that follow after. Peter, let's see. We assume that any comments about the shoreline at this juncture, when are they appropriate? And so that is also a great question. This decision, the proposed action, does not address the stabilization project, which is a separate project the BLM is undertaking right now. However, it does address recreational use and management, shoreline recreation management zone. And so depending on the context of your commentation and erosion, or whether it's about how use is managed on the shoreline, it may or may not be substantive. So I strongly encourage you in the context of that recreational management zone, and then proceed with commenting or not. On an interpretive site, who will pay for it? The decision specifically, if you read the proposed action in the scoping package of the creation of interpretive center on lot 21, it notes that this is not a federally funded project, simply with our partners on site to see whether there is a way to achieve that. Okay. Looks like another attendee has, please, if you do have a question, either use the chat or the question and answer section, enter that. A question has come in on the shoreline, and anybody who is specifically interested in the ONA's shoreline stabilization project at 10 a.m. on Monday, February 14th, that will be a presentation similar to this, specifically about that project. It also invites its own public engagement opportunity for those people who are very interested in what is along the Indian River and the Loxahatchee River. And I encourage everybody, much like this one, that presentation, a recorded version of that, who cannot make that meeting, and there is a period of time after that meeting in order to consider what we're asking of you, and so thank you for that. And then, yes, comments for this project, the 22nd of February. So we're about halfway through the comment period now to put your feedback in. Thank you to those people who may be in attendance who have already provided their comments. Well, with that, thank you for your attention. I appreciate everybody who's interested in the outstanding natural area and their public lands. If you do have specific questions that we were unable to answer about the process or the content of the scoping package, please contact us at the address on screen now. I do recommend that everybody follow our Facebook page if you are a Facebook user at BLM Jupiter Inlet. Lots of information about upcoming meetings and the other things that we're doing at the outstanding natural area. And then there's the official website website for you as well. So once again, thank you very much, and I'm going to stop this recording.